Well, Jim, let's beam on over to another WWE program on A&E. WWE Rivals. We've reviewed this. We've been watching it for several weeks now, and this is a big one. WCW versus the WWE.
Well, and that's... When I saw that, I'm like, wait a minute. How are they going to do this? We just got Goldberg and Lesnar that was a 6-month program with 3 matches and in 45 minutes without commercials. They're going to do the same thing or the same time for the 12-and-a-half-year promotional war between the two major companies, although actually they cut it down to basically 6 years because they glossed over. Vince took TV National, Crockett sells to Turner, and that's the Crockett years. So, I love their production crew there. Don't get me wrong, but did you notice the graphic on when they showed the clip where Vince opened the first USA All-American Wrestling program on the USA Network?
It said 93.
September 1993, not 1983, 1993. So they missed 10 years there. But basically they glossed over the Crockett years and then actually glossed over the first fucking several years of WCW, really. Because Eric Bischoff, who had a very pertinent comment here, said that nobody ever thought WCW, a distant second, would ever overtake the WWE. And they are correct. If you look at WCW from 1990 through 1994 or 5, everybody said that. They overlooked that the closest they ever got to competing with Vince, to actually being on a fucking fairly level playing field with Vince, was not the first 8 years that Turner owned the company, but the last 3 years that Crockett owned it. 1984 to 88, the ratings, syndicated and cable, were pretty much even. The towns were kind of split. The talent rosters were comparable. The WWF was always bigger after the national expansion because of Wrestlemania gross and things that we've talked about that Vince was able to do. But it wasn't a runaway. Jim Crockett Promotions in 1986 grossed $21 million. I have that in lawsuit deposition papers. He couldn't lie. He was under oath. It was the biggest year they ever had. What's 21 million in today's money? Somewhere around what, do you think? 60, 50-something, 60-something? That wouldn't be bad for any wrestling promotion these days. But it was the only one that was comparable and within competition distance of Vince. And then Turner bought it and dismantled it. And that's why nobody ever thought that they were going to overtake Vince McMahon. So, this was the WWE. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it because they didn't either. It was a fucking lengthy rivalry, but the high points were the WWE talking points. Raw changed the business. Live TV with unexpected action and shocking events. Well, that was goddamn every live studio wrestling show since the history of wrestling. And we mentioned that they wanted Shotgun Saturday Night to be something like Memphis TV. That's what they used to tell, like me or Lawler or whoever would have experience with that. Well, originally, Monday Night Raw was supposed to be like Memphis TV, live. Anything can happen, unpredictable. Because at that time that they launched Raw, not only had Vince brought Jerry Jarrett up to potentially take over for him if he went to jail, but they just hired Lawler to be a color commentator. So that's what they were going for then. It wasn't new to wrestling. It was new to the WWE. Am I misstating that, Brian?
It was very new to the WWE. Before that, Primetime Wrestling had been a studio show showing arena matches or TV matches. They didn't do small arenas. They didn't do live shows other than pay-per-views or an occasional Saturday night's main event. Not all those main events were live. So this was new for them, but live wrestling and live studio wrestling, if you want to call that a studio, the Manhattan Center, have been done obviously for years.
So then they get to the part where Hulk says, Vince and I mutually agreed to part ways. And they can't, not only can he not give an accurate ascertainment of what happened, but they can't actually come out and have anybody else say it either. Hogan was fucking blah. He was stale. They weren't caring. And Vince needed to shake things up, and Hulk didn't like being shook up. So he left and went to film Thunder in Paradise. And the story that he told, the reason why he went to WCW was he, quote, missed wrestling so much that he decided to come back to WCW and change the whole game there. And then Savage follows.
Well, it sounds good. It sounds better than Ric Flair called me up and said, this guy's an idiot and he has lots of money at his disposal.
But anyway, so Monday Nitro begins and Luger shows up and he is phrased at where they just did the biography where they pretty much said that he was floating and miserable in the WWF. Now he's one of WWF's biggest stars, debuts on. And they did the Billionaire Ted sketches, and I was around for some of that. Vince didn't have it in him not to retaliate and not to take shots at the other side, but he
took it personal.
He took it personally. He wanted to have the fight with Ted Turner because people knew who Ted Turner was. He didn't want to have the fight with Eric Bischoff because nobody knew who Eric Bischoff was. And even though Bischoff was running WCW, Vince wanted to frame it as Vince McMahon versus Ted Turner because that was somebody that he could allow himself to be seen on Turner's level by the public because he's another multimillionaire media mogul, yacht captain, whatever the fuck. With Bischoff, it wasn't even in Vince's mind. So he had to say some shit, and they did the Billionaire Ted stuff. And they made them, and this was true. They offered Hall and Nash 3 times what they were making for half the work, and it was guaranteed. And that was the key to the whole thing. The fans bought the invasion. They bought that in the sport that they loved and that they watched and followed, that they were increasingly being told in intricate detail was all phony. But all of a sudden, shit, Razor and Diesel have showed up. We're finally going to see this big promotional war. And people today overlook it wasn't, and I'm not knocking Hall and Nash even when I say this. I have knocked them in the past, but I'm not knocking them here. It wasn't Hall and Nash that instantly became the 2 biggest stars in wrestling when people have been watching them every week for fucking years on TV. Just because they showed up. It was because with very little internet and lack of communication and or inside knowledge of the business 25 years ago as opposed to now, a significant portion of the viewing public believed that they were still with the WWF and the WWF was coming down to Atlanta to kick somebody's ass. Am I overstating that, Brian? You were alive then.
I don't know. I've always wondered how much of the audience really believed they were sent from WWF as opposed to just former WWF wrestlers coming to cause trouble and you didn't know what to expect. I always thought it was more of that. I think in Vince's eyes,
a lot of people. I heard from, and remember, I'm with the WWF, so as I'm going in the back of the buildings, they're saying, hey, what's going to happen? Are you going to all that shit? A lot of because people have forgotten that the millions of people that were watching both wrestling shows, a lot of them were still not smart, not in terms of is wrestling a work, but in terms of how all this happens. And they bought it long enough at the start that once that they figured it out, they were already hooked. I'm just telling you, I heard it from people. And that's it was for a moment, you could believe something was going to happen, that somebody was going into business for themselves. They were going against the script. They were, whatever the case. And that's when, and that's when the NWO blew up. And by then, and then Hogan becomes the third guy. And now they've hooked him. And now, obviously, after a while, everybody knew, okay, Hall and Nash have left because they didn't show back up on the other program. But it wasn't instantaneous. And there's an element of what you said also, with regardless, they were those guys and now they're down here but they even covered in the program. The thing that I didn't like about the NWO was the same thing I didn't like about Degeneration X. The cool heel can get over, and you can use that to help your program, because Steve Austin started out as a cool heel before the people realized, wait a minute, he's our babyface. And other guys Ric Flair was a cool heel, but cool, badass, slick dressed, braggadocious, whatever heels can help your business. But childish, smart ass, cool heels that make your fucking baby faces look like dicks don't help your business. They just help their business. And while they're with you, that might help your business. But then when they leave, it don't help your business. And or after they've buried your other talent that's staying, it doesn't help your business. And when you try to follow it, it doesn't help your business because you've already let some jackoffs come out and break all the fucking rules. And what rules do you have left to break? So, yes, 1995 WWF was fucking cartoon. The garbage man and the plumber and the fucking hockey player and all the other shit. Vince wasn't going to get off of that until he had to, obviously. But going too far with letting people just make fun of your own business and do it in a wink, wink way to the audience led to basically the death of wrestling. Because we have not been able to follow the Attitude Era. And they used it all up. So DX was the WWF childish smartass group to counteract the NWO's childish smartass group. And people overlook. I love the hard, violent wrestling of this time, and the action, and the fucking carnage, and the fans being into these main event guys. But unfortunately, it was up and down the card and was for too long, and we ended up not being able to follow it. But for that time, they could do, for 2 years, nobody could do any wrong. Austin and McMahon, Austin and Tyson. 1998 was red hot. Everybody was over. And this actually gives you another look at it. They got to the point where they were hot-shotting without needing to hot-shot. Everybody was over. Everybody was selling out. The top main event guys were doing huge business, and every TV show was still a hot shot. So they lost track on when to reel it in until WCW self-destructed, which, happened shortly thereafterwards. And then talent starts going WCW to WWF instead of just the other way. And then comes the merger where now the corporate overlords of the entire Time Warner business are wanting this money loser off their books, because they went from making a fortune to losing a fortune in a year? And they never wanted wrestling anyway. It didn't fit their marketing strategy. And they, like any other major conglomerate, they didn't give a fuck whether it's making money or losing money. It was just easier for the people that wanted to get rid of it when it was losing money. And of course, they didn't go into any kind of detail on this program about how much money they lost the last year and a half or why. They just said, and Vince buys it. And they didn't mention the bargain basement flea market sale price. And then Stephanie's there at the end crowing, "We won the war." She had nothing to do with it whatsoever. She'd barely got out of school to come work at the goddamn studio as an intern by the time that the war was won. And Paul E. closed it up, and I'll get your thoughts. Paul E. closed it up with the summation of how the fans got screwed because of the contracts that all the top WCW guys were on with Turner Home Entertainment because of their shady bookkeeping and whatever. They all got to sit home for 2 or 3 years making massive amounts of money to do nothing, and we never got the dream matches. We got, they brought in Booker T and Diamond Dallas Page, but we never got Flair versus The Rock. We never got Austin versus Goldberg when it could have happened. We never got a variety of huge money pay-per-view dream matches because of the way that this, TBS was anxious to get out of the wrestling business. Vince wasn't going to not only put WCW over as a real legitimate competing force, but also he wasn't going to upset the apple cart of his salary structure to spend the money that he would have made back on pay-per-view by bringing in the top 4 or 5 guys that were making money on those contracts. He wasn't going to do that to the rest of his locker room, even though he would have made the money back because it would have damaged their salary structure going forward for the company, not the boys. And so it was all pissed away. And if you trace back to ECW Foles, because Paul E. was drastically in debt, WCW is sold to Vince at almost the exact same time, and a week later at WrestleMania, Austin hugs McMahon, and the business has been on a downward trajectory for the past 21 years ever since. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, they got a lot in there in an hour. Let's not overlook before I give my thoughts. Their version of the end of the feud is Triple H beating Sting at WrestleMania years after the fact, which one thing Tony Khan has done relatively correct, he has used Sting pretty good. WWE didn't know what to do with him, wasted him, and again, it was all just so they could say they won the war in some fictitious fashion. And I see you have no comments on that.
Well, I was waiting to hear the rest of your train of thought. I haven't disagreed with anything so far.
It was good, but they jammed a lot in there, and there's a lot of revisionist history. The WWE side, they took our former guys. Yeah, well, Vince let Hogan go. Was he not supposed to work in wrestling ever again? Was Bischoff at fault for wanting to bring the biggest star in wrestling of that generation, one of the biggest stars ever, into the company? There's a lot of that WWE. It was being done to us. It was being done to Vince. It was all about putting Vince out of business and killing him. Yeah, Bischoff made the comment drunk in a bar one night. And yeah, Ted Turner thought Vince was an asshole. But I don't think it was that at all. It was just Vince treats any competition like it's a personal attack on him. And that's what we saw here. I think there's revisionist history with DX. I actually don't think DX really took off as a concept till Shawn Waltman got there. Because Shawn Michaels wasn't as over as people want to remember him as being. Business was down with him as champion. They made him a heel, but he had go-away heat around the time of Survivor Series as far as I was concerned. Yeah. And with a lot of other people. And the business really took off when he left. And that's when Shawn Waltman came in. And that's when DX actually became something fans cared about as a concept. They do overplay the whole going to WCW in the tanks thing. The version I always heard was that, what did you hear? Didn't you hear that Ming wanted to go out there, or a few of the guys, and they were not allowed to go out there? But yes. now it's Nash and Hall wanted to go out there and say hello or whatever it was.
Yeah, no, I never heard that at the time, and I was in, because goddamn, they went to the Scope, so we were in Norfolk. No, we were in Hampton, and they were in Norfolk. Wherever the fuck, it was 30 miles apart. And I remember here, they're getting a fucking tank. What the fuck? And we knew nothing was going to happen, or I thought nothing was going to happen, because I figured, they would be obviously sensible enough not to let a fucking tank into the building. And it was just, going over to shoot the promos. But no, we did hear that Ming and a couple guys wanted to come out, and that would have probably been ugly. But Hall and Nash were never amongst the ones we heard wanted to come out and step onto Raw. But Vince did say, because somebody said, well, what happens if they come over here? Let them in. Great television, pal.
That would have been the best television ever. He's right.
Yeah.
No mention really of Russo. And, knowing what we know now all these years later, knowing what you knew, but not everyone else knew at the time, it is important to remember what that move was in the moment. When that happened, because I was with someone who worked for WWE, we were at actually lunch with Dennis Carluzzo when the news got out, and he got a phone call from someone telling him, and the idea that Vince Russo was jumping ship while WWE was exploding in popularity to WCW, at the time, there were a lot of people afraid about what was going to happen. I mean, it's true. People didn't realize yet the realities of everything. Because how could they have?
Again, Vince McMahon has a history, going back to when he first started in the business, of making quick, abrupt, sudden changes, decisions based on him getting in a grumpy mood and deciding he's going to do something else. And Shitstain was one of those. And as we, when we read some of the Shotgun Saturday Night ideas off the sheet that I had found in my files, everybody that was working around him knew what the fuck and knew what they were dealing with. The wrestlers had varying opinions. A lot of the underneath guys didn't have a lot of experience in the business, liked him because he wrote for them. A lot of the top guys, Bret Hart, I believe the quote was, he should be taken out in a parking lot and hung. Some of the top guys that were more interested in going to the movies than actually, I don't mean going to the movies to see one, to be in one, or considered themselves actors or were just nice, friendly people, had more tolerance for him. And most of the people who had a mind for the wrestling business had dreams and fantasies about setting his dead carcass on fire. But almost everybody that worked in the office, in the wrestling administration, or in a creative capacity or whatever, knew what the fuck they were getting and were not intimidated in the least. It was seen as a bonus for the WWF when the shithead left the company, because we saw what came out of the source rather than what the finished product was after Vince, McMahon, and experienced agents and a world-class network television production facility and the best announcers in the business and an incredible roster of talent headlined by The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin, what all those people did with the shit after it came out of the horse's ass.
To me, that's the thing they don't just say. What won the war was Steve Austin, period.
Yeah.
Steve Austin's what made them $1 billion company or a multi-billion-dollar company for what they'll sell for. It was Steve Austin. It was really about Steve Austin versus the NWO, if you really think about the ebb and flow. When the NWO got really big and popular, WCW took off. There were lots of other things on that show that people like me wanted to see, but by and large, it was the NWO, and when that started getting less popular, cratering out, even with Goldberg there, and Steve Austin took off, there was no coming back. The Rock is a major part of it. A lot of other things were part of it, whether it's The Undertaker or Mick Foley. But Steve Austin was the game changer. With no Steve Austin, it's a whole different story. Steve Austin won the war.
Well, and Mike Tyson with the assist for getting Steve Austin to the stratosphere, because
they didn't Bischoff try to get Tyson before Vince got him?
Yes. And that's where Bischoff says once they got Tyson, he said in the show, I knew this was trouble. Once they got Tyson, because now WCW had Jay Leno and what's the goofy basketball player's name with all the tattoos and the weird
Dennis
hair?
Rodman.
There you go. WCW has got Jay Leno and Dennis Rodman obviously visually just having fun for a lark. And WWF has Steve Austin fighting with Mike Tyson. And both of them look serious as a heart attack. That's what put all the eyeballs on Austin. And then everybody's, holy shit, look at this fucking guy. And there you go. So, you know, that's the thing is a lot of people that weren't living concurrently with this think that everybody then knew everything that everybody knows now. And they didn't, because a lot of it hadn't happened yet. So it was easier to see. It's always easier to see what happened when you're looking back on it than when you're looking ahead of it. But now we know. And that was Rivals. And this is your show.
That was Rivals, and this is my show, and people listen to the show in various ways. Some listen in their car, on the car stereo. Some listen at home on their computer.
Some people actually, I've heard from a lot of people have been emailing me. They open their windows in good weather so they can hear their neighbor listen to the show, and they don't have to pay for the electricity.
But they say the most rewarding way to listen to the show is with Raycon earbuds.
You know, I've heard about that. I've heard that it's very rewarding. As a matter of fact, if you can prove that you're listening to our show on a set of Raycon wireless earbuds, whenever Raycon calls you, you'll win a cash prize. All you got to do when the phone rings, you got to answer it and say, yes, of course I'm listening to Jim Cornette's Drive-Thru with the great Brian Last on my Raycon wireless earbuds. And they'll send you a check for $147,000.
No.
Well, as long as it's Raycon on the phone with you when you say that. If it's your fucking next door neighbor calling to borrow some bread, you're out of luck.
$147,000.
Well, that's before taxes. Folks, the Raycon wireless earbuds look, feel, and sound better than ever. They've got the optimized gel tips for the perfect in-ear fit. And these earbuds are so comfortable and they will not budge. You can trust me on this. As a matter of fact, we've recently taken some Raycon wireless earbuds down to wrestling school. We stuck them in some guy's ears, and we had him take 17 pile drivers. And neither one of those earbuds came out of his ears. And after number 14, it was easier to check because his head was no longer connected to his body, so we just rolled the thing around like a big head of fucking lettuce.
What are you talking about? What?
They won't fall out. Raycons give you 8 hours of playtime. And boy, I'll tell you what, you know, when I was younger, I could play for 8 hours. Now it's a good fucking 10, 12 minutes tops. But if you're still young enough to be able to have 8 hours of playtime, the Raycons will be right there with you. Just make sure it's a sexy soundtrack. They're priced just right, too, because you get quality audio at half the price of the other premium audio brands, which makes us wonder, why don't these other premium audio brands change their fucking prices? But I'll have you know that the Raycon Everyday Earbuds now have over 50,000 five-star reviews. That's the biggest number they've ever had. They're getting more every day. Some of them don't even come from Uncle Dave. And they've got 3 customizable sound profiles: left, right, and forward. So all your sound profiles will look exactly the same as everybody else's. And they've got earbud tap functions. Have you ever tapped an earbud, Brian? You would be amazed at the sap is so rich and sweet and sugary.
I don't think it's that kind of tap.
What you do is you take this spigot and you tap it into the bark of the tree.
You're thinking of I can't even get the words out. You're talking about tapping a
How do you tap an earbud without a spike that goes through it and you drive it in there and then you get the sap out of it?
See, that's where you take it too far. There are no spikes with Raycon earbuds.
No, these
earbuds are spike-free.
They're spike-free. That's right. It's like, well, I've already told that one, so I won't tell it again. But also, they've got the noise isolation and awareness modes. That means you can isolate yourself in the wilderness from all noise. Or you can tap the awareness mode. See, tap. I just see you can tap the awareness mode and instantly you're aware of everything going on in the world. Suddenly, sounds and voices will come at you at a dizzying rate. When you tap this awareness mode, folks, you will become instantly cognizant of the entire global situation. You'll know where everybody is. You'll know what's going on in every corner of the world. It's 100% awareness. It's amazing that they can get this kind of technology in these small little earbuds. Would you like to be aware of what's going on, Brian?
I would love to be aware of what's going on, especially with
too.
These spots, yes.
Yes. Well, I'll tell you what, you can go right now to Buy Raycon. That's BUYRAYCON. BuyRaycon.com/JCE. And you're going to get 15% off your Raycon order. That means you can isolate yourself from noise. You can become aware of, as a matter of fact, you can even have a cosmic awareness. If you get the special Raycons and you tap that awareness mode, then it'll tell you the secrets of the universe. Go to buyraycon.com/JCE and get 15% off and discover the secret to life. Buyraycon.com/JCE, 15% off, secrets to life, no extra charge.